30% versus 96%. I didn't go to either of my college graduations. I almost didn't go to my high school graduation. My senior year of high school, I was trying hard to save up money to pay for college. I delivered pizzas at night after school, and before school, I worked at an Einstein Bagels making bagels. 4 of the 5 weekdays, I would be at work at 4:30 in the morning to prep and bake bagels for the morning rush. Then at 7, I would leave and pick up my sister from home and drive to school. On weekends, I started closer to 6 in the morning, and I had to get off of work early to make it on time for graduation. Working in schools, I've gone through plenty of the start of the school year through graduation cycles. For about 10 years, I worked at an alternative school, which is a school for kids that are at risk for not graduating high school. All but a few of those kids wanted to graduate. I think I maybe met a dozen kids over the course of 10 years that actively didn't want to or were apathetic towards graduation all the way up until the end. Even the biggest assholes eventually broke down in tears when they realized they weren't doing enough to meet even the most basic standards for graduation. I can't remember anyone from my high school class that didn't graduate. Graduation rates are calculated by taking the number of graduates in a given year and dividing it by the number of kids that started in the school 4 years prior, their freshman year. If one of them moves or if one of them dies, that dings the graduation rate, which is why it's hard to ever hit 100%. After making bagels all morning, I changed into my graduation outfit, a pair of khaki cargo shorts and a bright orange Mr. T t-shirt. I listened to our 7 valedictorians, most of whom were good friends of mine, give their speeches, and remember thinking how easy it was to show up every day and do the thing we were all celebrating. High school was just a stepping stone to college, which was the expected next step for each of us, something we didn't really question. A year later, I was at a similar celebration for students in the Milwaukee School of Engineering's Upward Bound program, where I worked as a tutor. I tutored high schoolers, kids who were a year or 2 younger than me, with aspirations of becoming first-generation college students. The requirements for entry into Upward Bound included becoming a first-generation college student and or not exceeding a household income threshold, with priority status given to minority students. Kids in the Upward Bound received a stipend for attending tutoring sessions, and the program had a long-standing track record of producing first-generation college students. I've had moments in my life, like driving around the inner city of Jackson, Mississippi, where injustice becomes real to me, where observed needs align with what might become future action. I watched parents with tears streaming down their faces embrace their graduate and heard people say they didn't think this was ever possible. As an 18-year-old college student at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, 1 year removed from that same experience, I couldn't deny their emotional response to something that I was completely apathetic toward 12 months prior. I knew most of those kids and knew there wasn't much we didn't have in common except for where we were from and how we grew up. 6 months later, I quit engineering school and decided to become a teacher. For the 10 years I worked at an alternative school, we talked constantly about graduation. Graduation was the goal. How many graduates will we have? How many kids will walk the stage? Who is on pace to graduate and who isn't? In some ways, I taught math, and in others, I got kids through math so they could graduate. Graduation was an expectation. It was an expectation from the kids' parents, and it was an expectation for anyone that held a job in the district's central office. I remember my first year working there, and a man who I think was my supervisor told my coworker and I that it didn't matter how we got them to graduate, just do it. Schools in Wisconsin have something called a school report card, which gives a school a numerical score which correlates to a school being good or bad. Nearly everyone in a good school graduates, and the bad ones, not so much. In the intro, we talked about some of the highest performing schools in the state. In the 21-22 school year, Middleton High School, where Meg graduated from, graduated 97.5% of its 4-year cohort. North Division High School, our Milwaukee neighborhood high school, graduated 30.1% of its 4-year cohort. As a whole, Milwaukee Public Schools graduated 63.8% of its four-year cohort that year. I'm sorry, but what the fuck are we doing? Working in an alternative school, I'm firmly aware of how low we can set the bar for kids to finish high school. It was one of the reasons I stopped working at an alternative school and worked with a team of people to turn it into something better. A kid named Jesse attended school an average of 15 days a year for the first 3 years of high school and walked the stage at graduation. If you showed up and said you wanted to graduate, chances were you were getting a diploma. Conceivably, you could never show up to school until March of your senior year, enter something called the GED Option 2 program, which mirrors a traditional GED program but is for high school students, take 4 tests, pass personal finance and health, and take a 100-question civics exam on a Google form an unlimited number of times until you passed it. If you did nothing else but those 7 things, you qualified to earn and were given a diploma. If you could read at a 9th grade level as a 12th grader, you could complete this process in roughly 2 weeks. You can fail all of freshman, sophomore, and junior year and still graduate on time. I think it's important to understand how easy it is to graduate high school to articulate how messed up it is that a place can only graduate 30% of its freshman class. But I don't blame North Division. That's the point of this episode. When we hear an alarming statistic or are told that something is a certain way in the inner city, we have like 3 options on how we can place the blame. The easiest option is to place the blame on the place that creates the statistic. We do this with gun violence when we assume it's shitty people shooting other shitty people. We do this when we hear 53206 has a median household income in the mid-$20,000 per year. We must think there's something wrong with the people there, that they're lazy or they don't want to work. If we don't blame the people directly involved for creating the statistic, we blame something called the system. The system is set up this way and produces these outcomes, so the system is broken or the system is set up for these things to happen. The system is the educator's favorite thing to blame besides parents for struggles they have in their classroom. If the system wasn't set up this way, yada, yada, yada. The third option for blame is to blame oneself. 60,134 Wisconsin high school graduates were produced in the 21-22 school year. If you have enough money, you can live in a place with a school your high schooler can attend for free with a 95% chance of graduating high school. In Wisconsin, we have something called open enrollment. Each district dictates the number of students they're allowed to open enroll from other school districts. If you want to attend a high school in Middleton, but you don't live within the property tax boundary that allows you access to that school, you can open enroll by filling out a form and entering a lottery for open seats. You have to provide your own transportation, but you can attend that school for free if you're selected. I don't hear a lot of people choose the third option for blame. I think all 3 of these can be held at the same time. All 3 can be true. I remember this kid that was one of the few that had no intention of graduating. I think his name was Miguel. He wasn't a very nice kid. I'm sure something happened at some point in his life that made him act that way. I don't think teenagers come out of the womb 17 years prior with intentions of being a dick to people that were paid to help them gain the skills to successfully navigate the world. On the first day of school, Miguel had his cell phone in his hand with a video playing on the screen. A 4-second Google search tells me it would take 343 hours to watch all of Grey's Anatomy. On the days he showed up, instead of doing any schoolwork, Miguel binge-watched all of Grey's Anatomy during his senior year of high school. I blame Miguel for not graduating. He did that to himself. Years before, something entered his brain, some experience or a conversation, and told him he was better off watching Grey's than completing high school. I've never actually watched that show, so I couldn't definitively tell you if he was right or wrong. Maybe he was right. I only took 1 class in economics in college. The professor was a parrot head, someone that goes to Jimmy Buffett concerts. One time he was at a Jimmy Buffett concert at Alpine Valley and lost his car and never got it back. He just hitched a ride home and bought another one. His class was the first time someone explained economic theory to me. He told us about supply and demand, price is a function of supply and demand. If demand is high and supply is low, prices will rise. If supply is high and demand is low, prices drop. Demand for open enrollment seats is high and supply is typically low, which means they're valuable. The district I worked in shared a long border with the city of Milwaukee. Open enrollment seats were always full. Seats granted never didn't equal what was available. North Division has open seats that go unfilled. The demand to attend that school is less than the supply of available desks, which by default means that the value of the education offered there is less than other places. I think this happens in societal issues a lot. Collectively, we have decided that one place or school is less desirable, which on the surface it might be. Collectively, we use our resources to gain access to something we deemed better, and on an individual level, no one can blame you for choosing that. Why would anyone sign their kid up for a school that produces graduates at a rate of 3 out of 10? If your child succeeds, you are part of the minority. In other places, if your child fails, he or she is part of the minority. When a parent of a small child thinks about their kid's life as an 18-year-old, none of them thinks my kid is going to fail to graduate high school, yet that's the reality for 70% of the kids attending my neighborhood school. Disparity exists anytime we compare two places. We have a choice for what we attribute the reason for the disparity to be. We can blame the system. Schools receive money based on the number of students attending school. The more kids go there, the more guaranteed money the district will receive. However, if the residents vote to contribute more money from their local property tax base, they can. Places like Whitefish Bay regularly contribute a higher percentage of their property taxes to educating their young people than Milwaukee residents do. Let's do some quick math. Property taxes are based on the assessed value of your property. Let's say the average home price in Whitefish Bay is $500,000. Assessed value is less than market value, what a property would sell for. Assessed values hover around 90% of market value. So in this example, the assessed value of the average home would be $450,000. Property tax rates in that area are 2.6% or $11,700 a year. In recent years, my home was taxed at an assessed rate of $40,000, with property taxes coming in at 2.53% or about $1,000 a year. There have been years in the past where our property tax bill has been under $500. The systemic issue is that the financial investment in education between these two places is based on how wealthy the surrounding community happens to be. This creates an advantage for one space over the other. Whether it's attracting better teachers, creating better facilities, or offering additional opportunities for students, an advantage exists because of the disparity in financial investments made between the two. If I can squint, I can make out the outline of North Division when I'm on my run in the morning. If it's the weekend and I'm on a run with my sister, there's a good chance we are on a long one, and at some point we'll be running past Whitefish Bay High School as we make the long loop heading toward Lake Michigan. The two buildings are 4.5 miles away from each other. Whitefish Bay has a school report card score of 96.1 out of 100, which is high enough to deem that it significantly exceeds expectations. 95.5% of the students attending high school there graduate on time. North Division earned a score of 10.1 out of 100, meaning it failed to reach expectations. 1.1% of Whitefish Bay students are economically disadvantaged, which makes sense because Whitefish Bay is the second richest city in the state. Comparatively, 89.8% of students attending North Division are economically disadvantaged, which again makes sense because students attending there come from the poorest zip code in the state. But the system is only one of the things to blame. Obviously, some of the kids attending North Division are not good students. Some of them choose to not attend school and are part of a family structure that does not value education. I've known lots of families that didn't see value in their kid attending school regularly. At an alternative school, almost by definition, kids don't see or didn't see the point of a K-12 education. A lot of them were lazy. A bunch of them would rather play Fortnite than go to school. Some of them were too high to get off the couch or stayed up all night and slept through most of the day. Some of their parents were some of the worst people I've ever met, and their dysfunction manifested itself in the actions of their teenagers. I hear the term bootstrap thrown around. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I've known lots of kids that have had metaphorical bootstraps but failed to pull themselves up by them. I think you can make a solid argument to blame the system and the failing individual for the lack of high school graduation rates. But I think it would be short-sighted for us to not include a third way for us to view, blame, or responsibility. Within 4 years, we could double the graduation rate at North Division if we wanted to. It would be easy, in fact. It would only take 74 people to predictably get that outcome, maybe 75 just to be sure. I'd assume it would take even less, but 75 would do it. It's simple math. If 30 of the 100 students at North Division graduate, and we add, if 30 of the 100 students at North Division graduate, and we add 75 students from a district that produces graduation rates at 95%, we move the graduation numbers from 30 out of 100 to 105 out of 175, which is 60%. I'm sitting here writing this on a Monday. I got up at 4 and drank some coffee, and I'm about to go for a run, and I'll barely be able to make out the silhouette of North Division as I cross Center Street. When I do that, I'll be thinking about collective responsibility. A little bit of the blame for the dismal graduation rate falls on those of us that choose to do nothing. The dynamics that exist are allowed to exist because we let them. They continue to exist because we haven't done enough to disrupt them to the point of change. If we all strive to have the best, or at least a little more than we currently have, then we never settle for the worst. However, there are a group of people for whom their worst available option is their only option, and a lot of those people live in my neighborhood. The amount of individual sacrifice it would take to enact the type of change that would produce a doubling of the graduation rate at North Division is more than most people would find palatable, which means the answer is within the extremes. But if we can find an answer in the extremes, maybe we can find a solution in between the extreme and doing nothing. Maybe that starts with asking ourselves, who deserves the best?